Alright, I got the intake manifold gaskets on. Everything's cleaned up. Time to pull out my towels here that are keeping the intake ports clean. And I'll show you the intake manifold that we're putting on this thing. Make sure there's nothing down in his heads. These heads have so much carbon soot in them from that EGR intake. It's ridiculous. And that's why it's not going back on. To do these heads, all I did was pull the gasket off, give it a light scrape, clean it with some solvent, and then put these gaskets down. Felpros. They have tabs at either end that pop into holes in the head. Here's your non-EGR intake. Please don't go at these things with the whisk wheels. I literally just take a carbide scraper, scrape them clean, wipe them with solvent. There's the block for the EGR in the head. Comes up and it's blocked to there. Here's the other side. Yeah, this intake's came off another engine, so it's dirty. And I didn't clean out the inside. And you say, why don't you clean out the inside? And I say, what for? It's gonna get filled up again with oil from the blow-by from the turbo and the CDR valve. This fuel filter is going to go next after I figure out what I'm going to put in its place. Wiring harness. And if you guys run stock stuff, your factory wiring harness goes underneath this intake. But I'm going to change that and run the harness on top of the intake. There's the intake down. Gasket's still in place thanks to those little plastic holders. Fuel filter sits on top of its pedestal back there. Notice no big EGR piece sticking up. I'll bolt that down. And then your upper intake will go on like so. Into turbo and on. I'm going to show you guys the upper intake for the non-EGR. See, there's nothing in it, nothing on top. Take and drill yourself a boost reference port. I use the 1/8 inch pipe tap. They say to use a 21/64 drill. Drill it, tap it, which I didn't do yet, and then put this fitting in. 1/8" pipe to 1/8" compression. And then what I do is I use the copper 1/8" line. I run my boost reference and my fuel pressure through the 1/8" copper after compression fitting. I'll show you how to hook up the fuel pressure unit, and you'll see this fully assembled coming up. Make sure your grounds are hooked up good. Notice you get nuts. Make sure your injector lines are tight. Don't throw away those little clamps that hold your injector lines still. Catch them on the intake manifold bolts. Hook up all your wiring. I will fix the solenoids, and I will straighten out my copper line, tie it up out of the way so it's not getting caught on anything. Looks a little nicer than that. Like I said, I'm going to put a Turbomaster on it. I'll put everything else back in, the water pipe, filler neck, all the bolts. I had to fix the ground in the back there. I fixed that. I will get the air conditioning working on this truck soon. And I'm putting a new air filter in it, along with the Turbomaster. Hold on, as you can see, hooked up my wiring harness. I ran the harness up along the side. Remote PMD. I like the factory wiring. Keep it simple. Mounted the upper intake. I didn't put the air filter in yet. I am going to end up putting a Turbomaster on this thing, so the vacuum line is not hooked up. I am going to keep the solenoids because it's a half-ton truck. I did the EGR delete with the 3/4 ton intake. You'll see. You'll notice I put the boost reference fitting in the back. My copper line runs inside. I will clean these lines up. They're kind of just hanging here now for testing hookup. This is the fuel pressure setup that I run. You can see it clearly. Your inlet to the injection pump is cut, and then there's a brass T in it, 1/4 inch. The brass T comes out to this fancy fitting, goes to my feed line right at the injection pump. You can see I hook up the carbureted fuel gauge. I will mount these inside this truck. This is a boost gauge that I'm using. I'll show you that. This is the boost gauge I'm running. Make sure you label your lines so you don't get the copper lines confused when you get up here. One for boost, one for fuel pressure. Thing's still holding fuel pressure, which is great. You'll say, why am I using this carbureted small 15 gauge? Because it uses the 1/8" pipe thread on the back. Any mechanical fuel pressure gauge I've hooked them up uses the AN fitting. Then you have to buy the AN adapter, adapt it all the way down to the copper. With these, all you do is go the 1/8" pipe compression fitting to the 1/8" copper. It's a little easier connection. It's not as expensive a gauge. I mean, you're running relatively low fuel pressure, maybe 9 psi in these things. It's a 0 to 15 gauge. Don't do what I do and run your diesel fuel into the interior. Some might consider that a hazard. That's up to you. Keep things simple. That's my motto. Throw the copper line in, fuel pressure, boost. Usually this gauge, it's always a fuel related problem. This gauge will tell you if your filter's getting clogged. It'll tell you if there's a problem with fuel. Right away it'll start running crappy. There you go. Still holding fuel pressure. So that takes care of that.